Cascable's Recipes feature gives you the building blocks you need to automate many types of complex and repetitive shooting. This video will provide a short introduction to the Recipes feature, in which we'll build two small recipes based around real-world examples. Our first example will be a simple exposure bracketing recipe. Our client is creating an online store for their guitar shop and has hundreds of guitars they need to take photos of. However, it's important to them that the model stickers inside the guitar body are visible, which demands a significant increase of exposure since it's rather dark in there. This is something that Recipes can help with. First, let's get started by making a new recipe. In the Recipes Editor section of the app, tap Create and Edit Recipes, and choose where you'd like to store your new recipe. I'm going to put mine in my iCloud Drive so it'll be available on both my iPad and my iPhone. Let's name it Guitar Bracketing Photo Shoot and then create it. Let's think about what we need for our task. For each guitar we want a correctly exposed photograph and then an overexposed photograph that shows the body label more clearly. Since the first thing we need is a correctly exposed photo, we can have our recipe take the first photo right away. Let's add a take shot block to our recipe by dragging it from the block picker into the empty editor. The next thing we need is an overexposed photograph so we can see the label inside our guitar body. Let's take a change exposure setting block from the block picker and add it to the end of our program. The block defaults to increasing exposure by 1 stop, but for the best results with our guitars, we want a 2-stop increase. Tap the Change Exposure Setting block in your recipe to configure it. If you have a particular setting you want to change, you can pick it here, but for this example we'll leave it at Smart Exposure. With this setting, Cascable will figure out the best setting to change on your camera when the recipe is run. At the bottom, we can set the amount to change the exposure setting by, from minus to +8 stops. We only need +2 stops here, so let's set that. Now the camera's exposure setting has been increased, let's add another take shot block to our recipe to take the second photograph. You'll notice that as soon as we added a second take shot block to our recipe, a warning icon appeared in the toolbar. This means that there's something wrong with the recipe. Let's tap it to see what the problem is. Ah yes, back-to-back shots. Recipes run very quickly, and when being run, those two take shots blocks will be executed within a few milliseconds of one another, even with the exposure change in between. Most cameras need a small amount of cycle time in between shots, so Cascable is warning us that it's likely we'll encounter odd behavior when taking shots this close to one another. To resolve this, let's go back to the block picker and pick up a wait fixed duration block, and put it immediately after our first shot. The wait block defaults to 5 seconds, which is a little too long in our case. So let's tap the block and reduce the duration down to 1 second. The warning icon in the toolbar has now disappeared. Cascable will look over your recipes as you build them and warn you of any potential problems as they come up. Our recipe looks pretty good now. Let's run it in the camera simulator and see how it behaves. To do this, tap Simulate in the toolbar. We'll leave our simulated camera on auto and then tap Run Simulation. After a moment, we can see that our recipe took a shot, waited a second, and then increased the camera's exposure compensation setting to +2 before taking another shot. This is great, but we could do this easily enough on our own. We have many guitars to take shots of, so we want this sequence to repeat over and over again. To do this, we need a repeat block. Drag in a new repeat block from the block picker and place it at the end of your recipe. The repeat block will repeat items placed inside it, so we need to move our recipe's other blocks inside the repeat block by dragging them inside the arrows. The repeat block defaults to 5 repetitions. We have many more guitars than that, so let's tap the repeat block and change it to repeat 100 times. Alternatively, we could set it to until cancelled, which means that it'll repeat continuously until you return to Cascable and tell it to stop. You may have noticed that the warning icon has reappeared. If we check it, it's complaining that there are back-to-back shots again. This is because that now our recipe is repeating, our first shot will be taken immediately after the second shot of the previous repeat. Well, we need some time to swap guitars out anyway, so let's add a 10-second wait block to give us some time to put a new guitar in front of the camera. Let's simulate our recipe and see if it works. It's looking great, the recipe is being repeated. However, if we look at the exposure changes, we can see that it keeps going up until it hits the camera's limits. Whoops! Let's return to our recipe and add another change exposure setting block. This time, undoing our previous exposure change by changing smart exposure by -2 stops. One last check in the simulator, and everything looks good. Now we've perfected our recipe, it's time to run it on a real camera. Navigate to the remote control section of Cascable with our camera connected, then tap the shutter robot icon in the toolbar. In the module section, choose Recipes, then in the Recipe Configuration section, tap Recipe and choose the recipe we created earlier. Then tap Engage to arm the shutter robot. Finally, we can return to the remote control screen and set up our shot. Once everything is good to go, tap the shutter button and the recipe will start running against the camera. Our second example will demonstrate how to use variables in your recipes. Variables are an advanced feature that let you change durations while your recipe is running. This recipe is a very simple time-lapse. It takes one shot every few seconds. With our camera pointed at a clock, this creates a pretty neat fast time-lapse video. However, it'd be really cool if we could speed up and slow down time in our video. To do this, we'd need to slowly increase or decrease the time between each shot taken. This is where variables come in. First, we need to replace our fixed weight block with a variable weight block. To do this, swipe left on the fixed weight block and tap the delete button that appears. Next, pick up a weight variable duration block from the block picker and place it inside the repeat where the fixed weight block was. You'll notice that in addition to your new block, a new entry will be added at the top of your recipe. This new entry is a variable, and one is created for you the first time you use a variable block. Next, return to the block picker and pick up a change duration variable block, and place it inside the repeat just after the weight block you just placed. You can think of variables almost like notes with numbers written on them. The weight variable duration block looks at the value currently written on the note, then waits that long. The change duration variable block will take the value of the note, perform an operation on it, then write the result back onto the note. In the example we've created, the note starts with a value of 5 seconds. The first weight variable duration block will read this value and wait 5 seconds. Then, the change duration variable block will take that value, multiply it by 2, and write a value of 10 seconds back onto the note. Then, the recipe will repeat. But this time, when the weight variable duration block reads the note, it has a value of 10 seconds, so it will wait 10 seconds. Next, the change duration variable block takes this, multiplies it by 2, updating the value on the note to 20 seconds. This pattern continues as the recipe runs. You can see this in action by tapping Simulate and running the simulation. You'll see that the recipe waits 5, then 10, then 20 seconds and so on between each shot. However, we want to change this a bit. First, let's tap on the variable at the top of the list to configure the starting value and its name. I'm going to start at 1 second and call my variable shot interval. Naming your variables isn't required, but it's a great way to keep your recipes easy to understand, especially when using more than one at a time. Next, I'm going to tap the change duration variable block and change it to add 5 seconds to the variable each time. When we run this recipe against the camera, the result is a time-lapse video of a clock that seems to be accelerating in time. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to see the great recipes that you make with Cascable.